A really nice sunny afternoon, but you're going to hear some information about financial aid that could save you a lot of money and save you a lot of headache as you go forward and thinking about college. Just a little bit more of my background. I went to college at UC Santa Barbara. I studied film and media and anthropology, which is the study of human culture and things like that. I worked at Pennsylvania State University for a while for the online campus. So I was working with students taking classes remotely before everybody was doing it. I got a master's degree in higher education from Penn State World Campus, so it was also remote education. And then I've been here in Eugene for about 2.5 years working for the University of Oregon. So my job is really to make this all make sense for you, like what comes next. You may have heard, if you were in the last session on scholarships, some about scholarships in particular, but I'm going to give you the big picture. So, financial aid includes scholarships, but there's also things like loans and work study. So we're going to talk about those things here today. I want to encourage you all to go ahead and type in the chat whenever you have a question. If it's relevant to the slide, if it's not relevant to what I'm talking about at the time, I'll just save it to the end. We are going to have time to just do kind of a grab bag, but by all means, stop me, like put a question in there. I want to answer your questions more than anything. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, let's rock and roll. So what is financial aid? Funds provided to students and families to help them pay for post-secondary educational expenses. And I want to break it down because this might not be so obvious as it seems. The funds can go to you, the student, or they can go to your family. So there's types of aid that your family uses. It's for post-secondary educational expenses. So that could be a 2-year school. It could be a 4-year university. It could be a trade school. That is post-secondary. You're in secondary school right now in high school. And then it's for educational expenses. So those expenses could be things like tuition and fees that you usually think of when you think about paying for college. But it could also be things like books. You have to buy books when you're in college. It could be paying for rent if you're living off campus, right? So financial aid can help you with all of that. And the goal is to make college more accessible. So how do you get financial aid? The first thing to do, if you can, if you're eligible, and we'll talk about it, is to do the FAFSA. And that is the free application for federal student aid. So free means that if somebody offers to, help you do the FAFSA and wants to take money for it, like a tax preparer does for your taxes, just know that that is not necessary and that you can get free help not only from the federal student aid folks with the federal government, but also from all of the schools that you're interested in applying to. So I don't recommend paying anybody for help, and you certainly don't need to pay for the application itself. Now, this is the application for federal student aid. So this is the one that you're going to want to do if you are a citizen or a permanent resident of the United States. And it's going to mean that you are eligible for federal student aid and aid from the state of Oregon and from the colleges and universities you apply to. This is the big application to determine your ability to pay for college. So it's available every year. You can go to FAFSA.gov. You would do this in your senior year if you're going to go straight to college after high school. So October 1st of your senior year is the first time you can do it. And then each school has its own priority filing deadline. That's like when they want the FAFSA to be sent to them by. So at the University of Oregon, it's March 1st. And that means you really want to submit your FAFSA before October 1st and March 1st. And that's going to give you a crack at the most financial aid. It's going to use tax information that's a little bit old by the time you apply for the FAFSA. You can see that here. You can do it on the My Student Aid app on your phone or on a tablet if that's easier for you. Oh, and there's that last bit. And after you do the FAFSA, it will immediately tell you if you're going to get, if it thinks you're going to get, some type of federal financial aid, like a Pell Grant. That's money you don't have to pay back if it's called a grant. or a federal loan. So it'll give you an idea right away of what you might be able to get from the federal government. And then I don't know if you can see this, especially if you're on a small screen, but in the bottom left corner, it says estimated expected family contribution, or EFC. And that is a number that you can give to any school that you're interested in attending and say, hey, my estimated expected family contribution is this. What kind of need-based financial aid do you have available from your school that I might be able to get with that kind of level of financial need? Now, if you cannot do the FAFSA because you're DACA, you're a dreamer, you don't have a social security number, you can do the ORSA, the Oregon Student Aid application. You wouldn't be eligible for the federal student aid, but you can still get aid from the state of Oregon and from schools in Oregon. And that's open on the same time scale. So October 1st of your senior year, you can do it at oregonstudentaid.gov. Now, some private schools require an application that's called the CSS profile. So this one is like supplemental to the FAFSA. And there's only 2 colleges in Oregon that ask for it, both private colleges, Reed and Lewis and Clark. Certainly some out-of-state private schools require it. That's available October 1st as well at collegeboard.org. Okay, so first thing to do is your FAFSA or your ORSA, and then your CSS profile if you're applying to schools that need it. What comes next? Next, you want to look for scholarships. So where can you look for those? Well, first place to go probably would be the colleges that you're applying to. See what kind of deadlines they have and what they offer, what are the requirements. You can get some from the state of Oregon. OSAC is the Office of Student Access and Completion. And you can just go to oregonstudentaid.gov. That's where they have an application for over 600 different scholarships that they facilitate. And you want to submit that application by March 1st, the year before you start college. So the state wants to help you out, but you have to meet that deadline. Your high school guidance office, talk to Cherie. She certainly knows what she's talking about. She worked in financial aid for a while, you know, and certainly anybody in your school can point you in the right direction. Parents' workplace sometimes, local and national businesses, church, community organizations. I applied for one with a charitable organization in my hometown. I got $1,000 and that paid for my laptop that I used for college. It probably took me 3 hours to write that essay. So I got $1,000 for an essay that took me 3 hours. I got $333 an hour for that one. National search engines, you can look for the ones that are recommended by an individual college. That might be a little better than just doing a random search, because sometimes there's scholarships out there that ask you to pay for them, or you know, ask for your personal information. You don't want to get involved with those. And I just recommend putting together a calendar during your senior year and, you know, write down on that calendar when is the due date for each of these scholarships so that you can keep track of them all. So then after you apply for aid, really important that you check email. A lot of the federal stuff and your university stuff, it's all on email. So you're probably not going to get a push notification on your phone. You're probably not going to get a text message, which means that you've got to set those up if you don't check your email regularly, so that it says like, hey, you got an email from the University of Oregon, or, you know, get in the habit, that kind of thing. The schools might ask you to submit something to clarify what you put on your FAFSA. Like we might ask for a copy of your parents' taxes. So super important that you see those messages and you reply right away, because if you don't, you could lose some financial aid. This comes from the University of Oregon. We send out financial aid letters March of your senior year if you're applying to be a freshman at the University of Oregon in the fall. So it's going to depend on the school when they send it and how they notify you, but in general, schools want to know if you're going there by May 1st. So they tell you by late March what the financial aid is going to be, and then you can make an informed choice about how much it costs. Compare offers to find your best fit. So, you know, you might get your heart set on a particular college or university, but you want to make sure that it's an affordable option for you and that you feel comfortable with the cost before you commit mentally or you know, by clicking that box. And you can look at what's called the net cost on the financial aid offer. That is the cost of the school minus any grants or scholarships, the free money. And you can compare how much does it really cost at one school versus the other, because what they say it costs, the sticker price, it could be really different from school to school. I'll talk about that more in just a second. So types of financial aid, I've covered some of this, but I want to spend a moment talking about savings. So there's state plans to save money. I think I have a slide on this. I'm gonna go through the overview and then we'll come back to that. Scholarships and grants, both gift aid, free money, but scholarships are generally more limited in nature or based on financial, on some kind of merit like your grades. So maybe you have to write an essay and you have to have a certain GPA and not everybody gets it. Whereas a grant is more like something that's offered from the state or from the federal government, or everybody who meets this certain criteria gets it. Work study is a type of financial aid that you can earn, so it makes it easier to find a job on or near campus. It's almost like a job guarantee, so that if you apply for jobs, you're more likely to get one, and then you can work to earn some of your financial aid. Federal loans are a part of it for a lot of folks, especially for a four-year university, and especially if you're going out of state. You can borrow loans in your own name, your parents can borrow loans. The federal ones are the best ones. All right, so yeah, in regards to savings, there's a state savings plan that's called a 529. It earns interest, and if you or your parents put money in it, you don't pay taxes on that money in the year that you put it in. So that's a great way to save for college. You can start at any time. If you have high financial need, you could connect with an organization in your community to set up an individual development account. You just want to like Google Oregon Individual Development Account, or IDA. And this one is great because whatever money you put into that savings account, if you do that for a year, it gets matched. It gets tripled. So let's say that you save $1,000 over the course of one year, and you do that, bit by bit over the course of the year. At the end of the year, it becomes $3,000 to go towards college. So these are really great opportunities to just think about, like, okay, I'm going to save what I can right now. This is something you could do. You could start tonight to help make college more affordable. Now for scholarships, there's a scholarship for everything under the sun. I mentioned one I got. My boss is really tall. She applied for one with the Tall People's Club of America. She wrote about growing up in a tall family. She got a $4,000 scholarship, so she had to write a good essay. She had to submit it on time. But certainly if you're involved in a club or organization, if you've got a certain racial or ethnic background, you're involved in your church, whatever it is, there's a scholarship for it. And you'll probably need to have letters of recommendation for some of those scholarship applications. So get to know your teachers, let them know well in advance that you have a scholarship deadline coming up so that they can help you, or they can write a letter of recommendation. It probably help you write your own essays for that scholarship as well. Sometimes it can be helpful if you're asking somebody for a letter of recommendation to write out some of the things you'd like them to say, which feels kind of uncomfortable. Be like, I want you to mention that, I was, captain of the varsity basketball team junior year, but that can help them to make sure that they hit those high points, certain assignment that you did really well on, so that maybe they go back and they go, oh yeah, I remember that paper. That was a really good paper. And then they can talk about your accomplishments and your abilities. Get involved in extracurricular activities, take on leadership roles. Generally for scholarships, they want to see involvement. Did you advance? Did you become a leader? Did you contribute something new? Did you stick around for a long time? Were you committed? Write good essays, ask for help, spell check, make sure you answered the question that they asked you to answer for those essays. Now, I just want to give you an example of some scholarships. So these are ones that are from the University of Oregon. Different schools do things differently, but you can see like the first three here, Summit, Apex, General University, these are just based on your GPA. So this year you would get a $4,000 a year scholarship amounting to $16,000 over your time as a UO student if you have a 3.7 or higher high school GPA. That's how the Summit Scholarship works. In contrast, you see things like the Diversity Excellence Scholarship. I put an asterisk on it, and it says that one requires an additional application. So, we've got some that are automatic based on what you put on your admissions application. We've got some that require a separate application. So again, super important to check with any school you're interested in really early to see what kind of scholarship opportunities they have. Diversity Excellence, as an example, looks at a lot of factors. They want to see you have at least a 3.0 high school GPA. We'll consider race and ethnicity. We'll consider essays that you write about how you can contribute to diversity at the University of Oregon, a letter of recommendation. So there's a lot of things that go into it. There's also a special program at the University of Oregon called Pathway Oregon, and that covers your tuition and fees without using loans for all 4 years and gets you special advising. So you would qualify for this program if you go pretty much straight to college from high school. You could take 1 year off, but most students come straight from high school. You submit the FAFSA on time. You have a very high level of financial need as determined on that FAFSA. So it's so much that you qualify for the federal Pell Grant. 3.4 high school GPA. So that's really the one that's in your control. Submitting on time is in your control, but also getting at least a 3.4 high school GPA. So just to be clear, if you meet this criteria, if you were a student meeting this criteria starting this fall, you would have your tuition and fees covered for all 4 years. And then you would just focus on how to pay for your housing and your books and things like that. There may be programs like this at other schools, but it's somewhat unique to the University of Oregon. You may have heard of something called the Oregon Promise. This works in a similar way, but it's focused on community colleges. So it's a grant from the state that pays you basically to be a full-time student right after high school, excuse me. You do have to do an application for that one at oregonstudentaid.gov. You have to have at least a 2.5 high school GPA. Again, you're going to college soon after high school. And the idea behind a lot of these scholarships is we know that if you take some time off from high school, if you don't have a plan, it might get harder and harder to go to college eventually. So these scholarships are available to you if you're going straight to college after high school. We've talked a little bit about the different costs, but I wanted to show you this. There are direct costs. So there's things that we charge for. There's also indirect costs to think about. And all of that is in the cost of attendance that is shown at a college or university. So you have to think about all of this. You can get financial aid to pay all of it, but it might involve loans to get everything covered unless you've been really diligent in applying for scholarships. So, yikes, wow. These things are, these are really high numbers. And I show this slide to show you, first of all, that the cost that you see, the sticker cost, is going to vary. But the higher the sticker price, the more financial aid you are likely to see from that school. So just keep that in mind. A 2-year public university like going to LCC is going to cost less, but you get less for that money. If you go to a 4-year school, there's a lot more available. There might be like a great gym. You might be able to study with the professor. University of Oregon has a submarine. There's a great big library. So it does cost more to go to a 4-year school. But when it comes to public versus private, I think that the main thing is to wait until you see your financial aid offer, and then you can know what it's actually going to cost. So here are our costs, just to give you a sense of it for last year. It's comparable this year. So again, financial aid is going to reduce the amount that you're actually going to have to pay. Okay, so here are some tips. Start saving money now. We talked about those savings accounts, 529 or Oregon IDA, Individual Development Account. talk with your folks about paying for college. Surprising how few parents talk to their students about paying for college and vice versa. I mean, can they help you? Can your parents help you pay for this, or are you on your own? Can you afford to look out of state? Can you afford to look at private schools? Can you afford to look at a four-year school right away? Do you have to work while you're in college? You know, these are all things to really start planning out as soon as you can. Research and apply for scholarships. We talked about that quite a bit. October of your senior year, as soon as you can, file your FAFSA. There's probably going to be some help through your high school to help you, get that done. I went to a FAFSA filing workshop at Churchill last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago. Just to, if a question comes up, there's somebody right there who can help you do it. But once you know what you're doing on the FAFSA, it takes 20 minutes. So it's really not that difficult once you go through it one time. We talked about the net price from schools, but you can actually go on to the website of any school you're interested in and use what's called the net price calculator. So you can put in your GPA, you can estimate your financial need, and it'll tell you what kind of financial aid it thinks you might be able to get. So that can be a good way to compare the relative cost of schools that you're considering. Important deadlines. Mostly I know the University of Oregon deadlines. So January is around the time that our application is due. Eventually, you'll have to submit documents to confirm what you put on your admissions application. There's a priority filing deadline for the FAFSA and the ORSA and OSAC. That's your State Office of Access and Completion. Scholarships. Most of ours have deadlines by the end of February. So you kind of get the sense that by the time that you know whether you're admitted to a college or a university, it might start actually being kind of late to apply for additional scholarships. So the time to look is when you're first applying. And you want to apply for financial aid every year. So you do the FAFSA in October, you'll get your financial aid offer, look for emails and look in your student portal where there might be information about things you need to confirm from your FAFSA. Accept or decline the aid and apply for scholarships, and you just do it every year. So this is our contact information for the University of Oregon, but I have 15 minutes and I really want to hear what questions you all have.
Okay, just a moment here. Just a sec.